The most disturbing mysteries in the lands between trace their origins back to cosmic entities and events that predate even the Erd Tree's golden age, long before Marika's reign. What appears at first to be a shattered world of warring demigods and fallen grace is, in truth, the latest chapter in an ancient struggle between primordial forces that have shaped reality itself since time immemorial. The horrors you encounter as a tarnished, the corpses that refuse to die, the rot that consumes from within, the madness that whispers through the depths, these are not mere consequences of the shattering or Queen Marika's betrayal. They are symptoms of something far older and far more terrible, cosmic wounds that have festered across eons, waiting for the golden facade of the Erd Tree to crack and reveal what has always lurked beneath. The lands between exist as a battleground where outer gods vie for dominance, where the very concept of life and death has been twisted beyond recognition, and where the natural order was violently suppressed in favor of an artificial paradise that could never last. Every twisted creature you face, every inexplicable curse that plagues the demigods, every forbidden ritual performed in shadow, they all point back to a truth the Golden Order tried desperately to bury. The Erd Tree, for all its radiance and promise of eternal life, was built atop something it could never fully destroy, something that remembers what came before, something that hungers to reclaim what was taken. You see it in the way death itself has broken, in Godwin's corrupted corpse spreading its influence like a cancer through the roots of the world, in Millennia's body consumed by a scarlet rot that predates the gods themselves, in Michaela's unnatural slumber within a cocoon of blood, in the frenzied flame that seeks to melt all distinctions back into primordial chaos. These are not random tragedies or isolated incidents of divine failure. They are interconnected threads of a tapestry woven by forces that view the rise and fall of empires as mere moments, forces that planted seeds of destruction within the Golden Order from its very inception. The Greater Will arrived in the lands between and imposed its vision of perfect hierarchy and eternal stasis, but it was not the first cosmic entity to touch this realm, and the others never truly left. They retreated, they adapted, they waited, and they corrupted from within, turning the Erd Tree's greatest champions into vectors of its undoing. The demigods themselves, Marika's divine offspring, became living embodiments of these ancient curses, each one touched by powers that the Golden Order could not comprehend or control. Millennia, the blade of Michaela, carries within her flesh the scarlet rot of a forgotten outer god, a plague that turns life into a grotesque mockery of itself, blooming in flowers of decay. Michaela, the most fearsome of all Empyreans, sought to break free from the influence of outer gods entirely, only to become the obsession of Moog, who serves a primordial entity known only as the Formless Mother, a being of blood and wounds that existed before form itself had meaning. Godwin, the Golden, first of Marika's children to die, did not die completely. His soul was destroyed, but his body lived on, and in that impossible state he became something worse than dead, a prince of death whose corruption spreads through the very roots of the Erd Tree, infecting the lands between with a contagion of undeath that cannot be stopped or contained. Even Rani, who orchestrated the Night of Black Knives to free herself from the Greater Will's design, had to traffic with forces of destined death that were sealed away precisely because they threatened the Erd Tree's promise of immortality. The shattering itself, the cataclysmic war that tore the lands between apart, was not the beginning of the end, but rather the moment when all these suppressed horrors finally burst through the surface, when the contradictions inherent in the Golden Order's existence could no longer be maintained. Marika, the Eternal Queen, the vessel of the Elden Ring itself, shattered the very source of her power, and in doing so, she revealed that even the gods are trapped in a system they cannot escape, pawns of outer entities whose motives remain utterly alien to mortal understanding. The demigods, driven mad by their fragments of the Elden Ring, waged war not just for power, but because the great runes themselves carried the corrupting influence of the primordial forces that had always sought to reclaim the lands between. Godric grafted the limbs of others onto his body in a grotesque parody of the crucible, the primordial form of life that existed before the Erdtree imposed its rigid order. Rykard fed himself to a god-devouring serpent, merging with an ancient entity that predates the concept of divinity itself. Moggs has built his palace in a realm of blood, nurturing his stolen prize in preparation for an age that would return the world to its formless, primordial state. Even the tarnished you, called back from beyond the lands between to claim the Elden Ring and become Elden Lord, are part of a design that extends far beyond Marika's plan or the greater will's intention. You are drawn to these mysteries not by chance, but by the same cosmic forces that have shaped every age of this world, and the choices you make will determine not just who rules, but which outer god's vision will dominate the next era. The frenzied flame, lurking in the deepest depths beneath the capital, offers not salvation, but annihilation, the melting of all things back into the primordial chaos from which the greater will first imposed order. It whispers through the three fingers, it burns in the eyes of those driven to madness, and it promises an end to all suffering through the erasure of all distinction, all meaning, all life. This is the ultimate expression of cosmic horror in the lands between. The recognition that the outer gods do not care about humanity, do not operate by any moral framework comprehensible to mortal minds, and view the entire struggle for the Elden Ring as nothing more than a game played across dimensions and eons. The disturbing mysteries of Elden Ring are disturbing precisely because they reveal a universe where free will is an illusion, where even the gods are slaves to greater powers, where every attempt to create order and meaning is built on foundations of suppressed chaos that will inevitably resurface. The corpses that walk, the rot that spreads, the blood that calls, the flame that melts, these are not aberrations, but the true nature of reality, asserting itself against the artificial construct of the ancient past, long before the Erdtree's golden light ever touched the lands between, long before the greater will imposed its order upon the world. There existed something altogether different, something primal, something raw, something that defied the very concept of distinction and separation. This was the era of the primordial crucible, a cosmic melting pot where all life existed not as separate, defined entities, but as a single churning mass of undifferentiated potential. To understand the disturbing mysteries that would later unfold across the lands between, you must first understand this foundational period, this time of cosmic origins, when the very nature of existence was fundamentally alien to what would come after. The primordial crucible was not merely a place or a thing, it was a state of being, a condition of reality itself. Imagine, if you can, a world where the boundaries between species, between forms, between one creature and another, simply did not exist, where a single organism might possess scales, fur, feathers, and flesh all at once, where the concept of a pure bloodline or a distinct race had no meaning whatsoever. This was the crucible, and from it flowed what scholars of later ages would call the primordial current, a foundational energy that permeated every corner of the nascent lands between. This current was not the refined golden grace that would later define the age of the Erd tree. It was wild, untamed, and carried within it the potential for infinite variation and transformation. The primordial current functioned as the lifeblood of this ancient world. It surged through the earth, through the waters, through the very air itself, and wherever it touched, life erupted in forms both wondrous and terrible. This energy did not discriminate, did not select, did not refine. It simply created endlessly and without purpose or design. The creatures that emerged from the crucible during this time bore the marks of this chaotic genesis. They were amalgamations, beings that combined traits from countless different forms of life, and they thrived in a world that had not yet learned to reject such diversity. But the crucible did not exist in isolation from the cosmic forces that shaped reality. Even in this primordial age, the influence of beings far greater than mortal comprehension reached down to touch the world. Chief among these was the formless mother, an outer god whose very nature embodied the concepts of blood, wounds, and the raw, visceral aspects of life itself. The formless mother was not a creator in the traditional sense. She did not shape life with careful intention or divine plan. Instead, she exerted her influence upon the crucible itself, warping and twisting the raw, unrefined life that bubbled forth from that cosmic wellspring. The formless mother's touch upon the crucible was profound and lasting. Where her influence spread, the life that emerged took on characteristics that reflected her nature. Blood became sacred, not as a mere fluid, but as a conduit of power and connection. Wounds were not simply injuries, but marks of transformation, gateways through which her power could flow into the world. The formless mother did not impose order upon the crucible. Rather, she amplified its chaotic nature, ensuring that the life which sprang forth would forever carry the potential for savage, untamed expression. This influence manifested most clearly in the beings who would later be known as omens. These individuals, born with horns jutting from their flesh, scales covering their skin, and other physical traits that seemed to defy the natural order of later ages, were not aberrations or mistakes. They were, in truth, the purest expressions of the crucible's original state. Every horn that sprouted from an omen's skull, every patch of rough scales that covered their bodies, every bestial feature that marked them as different, these were echoes of that ancient time when all life was blended together in the crucible's embrace. The omens were living fossils, biological monuments to an age that the world had tried desperately to forget. In the societies that would arise in later eras, particularly during the reign of the Golden Order, omens would be viewed with horror and disgust. They would be called cursed, abominations, creatures deserving only of imprisonment or death. The Omen twins, Morgoth and Mog, both born to Queen Marika herself, would suffer unimaginable torment simply for bearing these ancient traits. But this persecution was built upon a fundamental misunderstanding. The omens were not cursed by some malevolent force. They were simply remnants, living proof that the crucible's influence had never truly left the world, that beneath the veneer of order and refinement imposed by the Erd tree, the old chaos still lurked, waiting to emerge. The physical characteristics of omens varied widely, reflecting the crucible's diverse nature. Some bore great curved horns, reminiscent of rams or bulls. Others sprouted multiple smaller horns across their bodies, like grotesque crowns. Scales might cover their arms and legs or cluster around their torsos. Some developed tails, vestigial wings, or claws that seemed to belong to creatures that had never walked the earth in any recognizable form. Each omen was unique, a singular expression of the crucible's infinite potential for variation, and each one carried within their blood the primordial current, that ancient energy that had once defined all life. But the formless mother's influence upon the crucible extended beyond the creation of omens. In those ancient days, another manifestation of her power emerged, one that would shape the destiny of an entire race and threaten the very existence of the world in ages to come. This was the Fell God, a being of immense destructive power whose very existence embodied the most violent and catastrophic aspects of the Crucible's potential. The Fell God was not separate from the formless mother. Rather, it was an expression of her influence, a focusing of her chaotic energy into a singular, terrible purpose. The Fell God manifested as a being of pure flame, but not the gentle, warming fire that brings comfort and light. This was the flame of annihilation, the fire that consumes all it touches and leaves nothing but ash in its wake. The Fell God's flame was red, the color of fresh blood, and it burned with an intensity that could melt stone and boil the very air. This was destructive power made manifest, the crucible's creative chaos inverted into pure entropy. And this god found worshippers. The fire giants, a race of colossal beings who towered over the landscape like walking mountains, became devoted to the Fell God. These giants were not merely large humans, they were fundamentally different creatures, beings whose very physiology seemed designed for a world of greater scale and harsher conditions. Their skin was thick and weathered, capable of withstanding temperatures that would instantly incinerate lesser beings. Their eyes glowed with an inner fire, reflecting the power of the god they served. And in their chests, each fire giant carried a flame, a literal piece of the Fell God's essence that burned eternally within them. The fire giant's worship of the Fell God was not a casual devotion or a matter of cultural tradition. It was an existential bond, a connection so deep that the giants and their god were inseparable. The Fell God granted them power beyond measure, the ability to summon flames that could reduce entire armies to cinders, the strength to reshape the landscape with their fury, the resilience to endure in the harshest environments imaginable. In return, the fire giants became the Fell God's instruments in the world, the living embodiments of its destructive will. This relationship between the fire giants and the Fell God established a deep connection between their race and the destructive aspects of the primordial crucible. The giants understood, perhaps better than any other beings of their time, that the crucible was not merely a source of creation, but also of destruction, that the same energy which could bring forth new life could also obliterate existing forms. That chaos, by its very nature, builds and destroys in equal measure. The fire giants embraced this truth completely, and in doing so, they became perhaps the most dangerous force in the ancient world. The giants made their home in the frozen peaks of the mountain tops of the giants, a realm of eternal winter where the cold was so intense that it could freeze flesh solid in moments. Yet even in this frozen wasteland, the fire giants thrived, their inner flames keeping them warm, their devotion to the Fell God sustaining them. They built great forges and altars where they could offer worship to their god. They developed rituals and ceremonies centered around fire and destruction, and they waited, patient as the mountains themselves, for the day when the fell god would call upon them to unleash their full power upon the world. The evidence of this ancient era, of the crucible and the powers that shaped it, did not entirely vanish when the age of the Erd Tree began. Remnants survived, preserved by those who understood the value of the old ways. The Crucible Knights, an order of elite warriors who would later serve the early Erd Tree, wore armor that reflected the diverse animalistic aspects of life that originated from the Crucible. Their plate was not smooth and uniform like the armor of later ages. Instead, it featured organic curves and protrusions, designs that evoked scales, carapaces, and the natural armor of beasts. This was not mere aesthetic choice. The armor itself was imbued with the crucible's essence, granting its wearers a connection to that ancient power. More significantly, the Crucible Knights preserved and practiced incantations that drew directly upon the primordial current. These were not the refined golden miracles of the Erd Tree's faithful. They were raw expressions of the Crucible's power, spells that transformed the caster's body in ways that echoed the undifferentiated life of the ancient past. The incantation, known as aspects of the Crucible, horns caused great horns to sprout from the caster's body, which they could then use to gore their enemies with devastating force. Aspects of the Crucible. Tail grew a powerful tail that could sweep aside multiple foes. Aspects of the Crucible. Breath allowed the caster to exhale flames like a dragon, channeling the destructive potential that had always been part of the Crucible's nature. These incantations demonstrated something crucial about the primordial Crucible. They showed that the power of that ancient age was not lost or diminished, but merely suppressed, waiting beneath the surface of the world for those who knew how to access it. Every time a Crucible Knight called upon these aspects, they were reaching back across eons, touching the same energy that had once defined all life. They were becoming, if only for a moment, what all creatures had once been: undifferentiated, mutable, capable of taking on any form that survival demanded. The existence of the Crucible and the diverse life it spawned suggested something profound about the nature of the lands between. It revealed that the neat categories and distinctions that later societies took for granted, the separation of humans from beasts, of nobles from commoners, of the blessed from the cursed, were not natural or inevitable. They were imposed, artificial constructs created by powers that sought to control and order what had once been beautifully, terrifyingly free. The Crucible represented a time when a being might have the head of a lion, the wings of an eagle, the tail of a serpent, and the torso of a human, and this would not be seen as monstrous or unnatural, but simply as life expressing itself. The Formless Mother's presence in this era laid the groundwork for conflicts that would rage for thousands of years. Her influence ensured that the old chaos could never be fully suppressed, that no matter how much order the Erd Tree imposed, the primordial current would continue to flow, and beings touched by the Crucible would continue to be born. The omens, the fire giants, the strange hybrid creatures that lurked in the deepest corners of the world, all of these were her legacy, proof that the ancient past could not be erased or forgotten. This era, this time of cosmic origins, before the Golden Order, before the Erd Tree, before the Greater Will's influence became dominant, represented something that later powers would desperately try to bury and deny. It was a reminder that the world had not always been as it was, that the current order was not eternal or inevitable, and that beneath the golden light, older, stranger powers still dwelt. The primordial Crucible and the formless mother who shaped it were the foundation upon which all later mysteries would be built, the ancient chaos from which all disturbing truths would eventually emerge. Long ages after the primordial forces first shaped the lands between, when the dragons still ruled the skies and the giants tended their flame in the north, a new power turned its gaze toward this realm. In the ancient past, before the age of Queen Marika, before the golden light of the Erd tree illuminated every corner of the land, an event occurred that would fundamentally reshape reality itself. This era, known as the Greater Will's Dawn, marked the beginning of a cosmic intervention that would define the destiny of every living creature in the lands between for millennia to come. The Greater Will, an outer god existing beyond the comprehension of mortal minds, beyond the stars themselves, made a deliberate choice to extend its influence into this world. Unlike the other outer gods that whispered to the inhabitants of the lands between or sought champions to enact their will, the Greater Will took direct action. It sent forth an emissary, a living weapon of cosmic order, to establish its dominion over this realm of chaos and primal forces. This emissary was the Elden Beast, a creature of pure golden energy, a vassal of the Greater Will itself, designed to be both messenger and enforcer of a new universal law. The Elden Beast descended upon the lands between as a golden meteor, a living star that tore through the heavens with such brilliance that it could be seen from every corner of the realm. Ancient texts preserved in the libraries of Raya Lucaria describe this moment as the night the sky burned gold, when the darkness was banished for a full cycle of the moon. The impact of this celestial arrival sent shockwaves through the land, and in the crater left by its descent, something miraculous began to take form. The Elden Beast did not remain a separate entity, a visitor from beyond the stars. Instead, it underwent a transformation that would become the foundation of a new age. The living star became the Elden Ring itself, a metaphysical construct of pure order, a set of cosmic laws made manifest in reality. The Elden Ring was not merely a physical object, though it would later be represented as such in the hearts and minds of those who served it. It was the fundamental ordering principle of the world, a collection of great runes that each governed different aspects of existence: death, life, causality, fate. All of these concepts were now bound within the structure of the Elden Ring. With its establishment came the Golden Order, a new world order based entirely on the principles brought by the Greater Will. Where once the lands between had been governed by the raw, chaotic power of the primordial crucible, where life and death flowed in natural cycles dictated by ancient dragons and primordial forces, now there would be structure, hierarchy, and divine mandate. The Golden Order's fundamental principles were established in these earliest days, carved into the very fabric of reality by the power of the Elden Ring. These principles emphasized order above all else, a cosmic stability that would prevent the chaotic blending of life that had characterized the age of the Crucible. The Golden Order demanded clear boundaries, defined categories, and rigid hierarchies. It rejected chaos, rejected the formless intermingling of different aspects of life, and instead promoted a vision of the world where everything had its proper place, its designated role in the grand design. The concept of destined death became fixed, no longer a natural cycle but a controlled mechanism governed by the Elden Ring itself. The very laws of physics, of causality, of how souls moved through the world, all of these were now subject to the order imposed by the Greater Will through its golden vessel. From the site where the Elden Beast had transformed itself into the Elden Ring, a tree began to grow. This was the Erd tree, and it would become the most visible and enduring symbol of the Golden Order's power. The Erd tree was unlike any tree that had existed before in the lands between. It grew with impossible speed, reaching heights that dwarfed even the ancient dragons in flight. Its trunk was golden, its leaves radiated light, and its roots spread deep into the earth, drawing life and power from the very essence of the lands between. The Erd tree was parasitic in nature, though this truth would be obscured by centuries of religious devotion. It fed upon the land itself, upon the souls of the dead who were returned to it through burial practices that became sacred rites, upon the ambient energy that had once flowed freely through the world. The growth of the Erd tree fundamentally altered the landscape of the lands between. Where its roots spread, the land became more fertile, but also more dependent on the tree's continued existence. The golden light that emanated from its branches could be seen from every province, from the windswept cliffs of Limgrave to the volcanic slopes of Mount Gelmir, from the mist-shrouded valleys of Lurnia to the frozen wastes of the mountain tops of the giants. The Erd tree became the axis around which the entire world revolved, both literally and metaphorically. The capital city that would eventually be known as Lendl was built at the base of the Erd tree, positioned to receive the maximum blessing from its presence. From the Erd tree flowed a golden sap, a substance of immense spiritual power known as the blessing of the Erd tree. This blessing was not distributed equally or randomly. It was bestowed upon individuals deemed worthy by the greater will, manifesting as a golden light visible in their eyes, a radiance that marked them as chosen. Those who received this blessing, this grace, were elevated above their fellow inhabitants of the lands between. They were granted longer life, greater strength, and most importantly, guidance. The grace appeared to them as golden rays of light, visible only to the blessed, pointing them toward their destined purpose, toward the actions the greater will wished them to take. This system of grace created an immediate hierarchy in the emerging society of the Golden Order, dividing the world into those who were blessed and those who were not. Yet the Erd tree, magnificent as it appeared, was not the first form of this cosmic tree. The primordial crucible, that chaotic cauldron of blended life from the earliest age, existed as the primordial form of the Erd tree itself. Scholars who dared to study the forbidden histories discovered that the Erd tree had not replaced the crucible, but had instead grown from it, transforming its chaotic energy into ordered golden power. The crucible had been where all life was once blended together, where the distinctions between species, between forms, between essences were fluid and meaningless. Creatures born from the crucible might have features of multiple animals, might possess abilities that defied categorization. It was a time of wild, untamed potential, where evolution and mutation happened not over generations, but in single lifetimes. The champions of this crucible age, warriors who had emerged when the Erd tree was still young and its connection to the crucible still strong, were known as the Crucible Knights. These were not ordinary soldiers, but paragons of martial prowess who embodied the raw, primal power of the primordial crucible itself. The Crucible Knights displayed physical features that would later be considered monstrous or aberrant under the refined doctrines of the Golden Order. Some possessed wings that sprouted from their backs, not the feathered wings of birds, but scaled reptilian appendages that spoke to the draconic heritage of the crucible. Others had tails, thick and powerful, that could be used as weapons in combat. These features were not deformities, but blessings, manifestations of the Crucible's power made flesh. The most renowned of these early champions were Ordovis and Siluria, Crucible Knights, whose names would be remembered even after their kind fell from favor. They wore armor of deep bronze and gold, crafted in styles that predated the elegant designs of later Golden Order knights. Their weapons, particularly the unique curved greatswords they wielded, were imbued with the power of the crucible itself, capable of unleashing devastating attacks that channeled primal energy. The Crucible Knights served as protectors of the nascent Erd Tree, guardians of the new order that was emerging, even though they themselves were products of the old chaos. As the Golden Order grew in power and influence, as the Erd Tree matured and its golden light spread further across the land, the Crucible Knights were gradually integrated into the formal military structure of this new civilization. Their power was too valuable to discard, their loyalty too proven to question, but they represented a philosophical problem for the increasingly refined Golden Order. The raw, chaotic aspects of the crucible that gave the knights their power stood in direct opposition to the ordered, categorized worldview that the greater will promoted. Nevertheless, the crucible knights were harnessed and their abilities were studied, codified, and incorporated into the martial traditions of the Golden Order, though always with an undercurrent of unease. This unease eventually transformed into active suppression. As generations passed and the memory of the Crucible Age faded, the Golden Order began to view the aspects of the Crucible with increasing disdain. What had once been celebrated as blessings became seen as barbaric remnants of a primitive past. The wings, the tails, the horns, all the physical manifestations of crucible power were reclassified as omen features, as curses rather than gifts. The Golden Order's scholars and priests had taught that these aspects were unrefined, that they represented a failure to achieve the pure, ordered form that humanity was meant to possess under the greater will's design. Incantations that called upon crucible power were moved from the mainstream liturgy to specialized, almost secret practices, taught only to a select few who could be trusted to use them in service of the order. The demonization of crucible aspects had profound social consequences. Children born with horns or other crucible features were increasingly ostracized, hidden away by ashamed families, or in the worst cases, imprisoned in sewers beneath the capital. The Crucible Knights themselves, once honored champions, found their status diminished. They were still employed as elite soldiers, their combat prowess too valuable to waste, but they were no longer celebrated as heroes. The younger generations of knights, trained in the pure Golden Order style, wielding straight swords and spears, clad in armor that emphasized elegance and refinement, rather than the brutal effectiveness of the old crucible designs. Central to the entire structure of the Golden Order was the concept of grace, that guiding light from the greater will that had been flowing from the Erd Tree since its earliest days. Grace was not merely a blessing or a mark of favor. It was an active force in the lives of those who possessed it, a constant reminder that they served a higher purpose, that their actions were part of a divine plan. The golden rays of grace would appear before the blessed, pointing them toward locations of significance, toward challenges they needed to overcome, toward enemies they needed to defeat. This guidance created a sense of destiny, of inevitability, that reinforced the Golden Order's claim to absolute authority. If the greater will itself was directing your steps, how could you question the path you walked? Yet grace could be lost. This was perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the system for those who lived under the Golden Order. The Greater Will, through mechanisms that remained mysterious even to the most learned scholars, could withdraw its blessing from individuals or even entire bloodlines. Those who lost the guidance of grace, who saw the golden light fade from their eyes, were known as the Tarnished. The first Tarnished appeared early in the Golden Order's history, individuals who had somehow failed in their purpose or whose role in the Greater Will's plan had been completed. These Tarnished were not merely stripped of their blessing, they were exiled from the lands between entirely, driven out beyond the fog that surrounded the realm, cast into outer lands where the Erd Tree's light did not reach. The exile of the Tarnished served multiple purposes for the Golden Order. It removed potential sources of dissent, individuals who might question the system now that they no longer benefited from it. It also served as a powerful warning to those who remained, a demonstration that the Greater Will's favor was conditional, that even the blessed could fall from grace. The Tarnished were told that they would live and die in the lands beyond the fog, that they would wage war and grow strong through conflict, and that their descendants would one day be called back to the lands between for a purpose not yet revealed. This promise of eventual return was small comfort to those forced to leave behind everything they had known. As the Golden Order solidified its control over the lands between, as the Erd Tree grew ever larger and its roots spread ever deeper, certain families and bloodlines began to distinguish themselves as particularly favored by the Greater Will. These families, who would collectively become known as the Golden Lineage, were those who consistently produced individuals blessed with powerful grace, who demonstrated exceptional loyalty to the Golden Order's principles, and who possessed the strength to enforce the Greater Will's dominion over the land. They became the nobility of this new age, granted lands and titles, given authority over lesser peoples, and charged with maintaining order in their respective domains. The Golden Lineage was not yet led by Queen Marika in these earliest days. She had not yet emerged as the central figure of the Golden Order, the Eternal who would become the vessel of the Elden Ring itself. But the structures that would enable her rise were being established. The hierarchies that would place her at their apex were being built stone by stone, generation by generation. The Golden Lineage represented the ultimate success of the Greater Will's intervention in the lands between, the transformation of chaotic, primal humanity into ordered, purposeful servants of a cosmic design. With the Greater Will's influence firmly rooted in the lands between through the Elden Ring and the Erd Tree, the stage was set for a single figure to unite these cosmic powers under mortal rule. That figure would be Queen Marika the Eternal, and her ascension marks the true beginning of what history would remember as the Age of the Erd Tree, also known as the Age of the Golden Order. This was not merely a political transition, but a fundamental reshaping of reality itself, where the laws of life, death, and existence would be rewritten according to Marika's vision and the Greater Will's design. Marika, whose origins remain shrouded in mystery, though some scholars suggest she came from the Numen people, a race from beyond the lands between, was chosen by the Greater Will to become the living vessel of the Elden Ring. This was no simple coronation. The Elden Ring, that cosmic rune containing the fundamental laws of reality, was placed within her very body, making her both queen and god in one. She became Marika the Eternal, a title reflecting her transcendence beyond mortal limitations. With the Elden Ring as her authority and the Erd Tree as her symbol, she established the Golden Order, a religious and philosophical system that would govern every aspect of existence in the lands between. The Golden Order was not just a set of laws, but a metaphysical framework determining what was sacred and what was heretical, what deserved grace and what should be cast into shadow. But the path to absolute dominion was not unopposed. The lands between was home to many ancient powers who did not readily accept this new cosmic authority. Among the most formidable were the fire giants, towering beings who inhabited the mountain tops of the giants and tended the flame of ruin, a primordial fire that predated the Erd tree itself. This flame possessed the terrible power to burn the Erd tree, making the giants an existential threat to Marika's new order. Understanding that her golden order could never be secure while the flame of ruin remained in hostile hands, Marika waged a brutal campaign of extermination against the fire giants. This was total war, a genocide carried out with divine sanction. The giants, despite their immense size and strength, fell one by one to Marika's forces. In the end, only a single fire giant remained alive, and even this survivor was not granted mercy. Marika cursed the last giant to eternally tend the very flame of ruin that had been his people's sacred charge, transforming guardian into prisoner. This cruel irony ensured that the flame would never go out, for it still had a purpose in the cosmic order, but it would be forever contained, watched over by the broken remnants of a destroyed civilization. The giant's fate was a warning written in living flesh about the price of opposing the Golden Order. Yet Marika's most consequential act during this period concerned death itself. In the natural order, death was an inevitable part of existence, governed by the rune of death, also called destined death, which was part of the Elden Ring. This rune ensured that all things, even gods and demigods, would eventually perish. But Marika saw death as a flaw in her perfect order, a source of instability and loss. She made a decision that would echo through the ages with catastrophic consequences. She removed the rune of death from the Elden Ring and sealed it away, entrusting it to her most loyal servant, Malekith the Black Blade. Malekith was more than a mere warrior. He was Marika's shadow, a beast-like guardian bound to her by ancient magic, utterly devoted and terrifyingly powerful. Within Malekith's own body, the rune of death was imprisoned, locked away from the world. With destined death sealed, true death became impossible in the lands between. Those who fell would return to the Erd tree, their souls recycled back into the great tree to be reborn. The demigods, Marika's divine children, became truly immortal, unable to die no matter what wounds they suffered. This seemed like a blessing, an age without the fear of mortality. But in removing death, Marika had created something unnatural, a world where the cycle of life and death was broken, where souls accumulated rather than moving on, where the natural order was replaced by stagnation disguised as eternity. The Golden Order, as it solidified under Marika's rule, became increasingly rigid and exclusionary. It did not simply govern, it defined what was acceptable and what was abomination. The crucible, that primordial form of life from which all things had emerged, with its chaotic mixture of life forms and its wild, untamed aspects, was now seen as primitive and impure. Those born with crucible aspects, such as horns, tails, or wings, were deemed imperfect, deviations from the Golden Order's ideal of refined, pure existence. The omens, individuals born with horns and other bestial features reminiscent of the crucible, faced particularly brutal persecution. In the royal capital of Leyndell, omen children born to nobility had their horns cruelly cut off, a practice that often proved fatal. Common-born omens were cast into the sewers beneath the capital, the subterranean shunning grounds, where they lived in darkness and filth, forgotten by the golden world above. This systematic oppression revealed the dark underside of the Golden Order's supposed perfection. It was an order built not just on cosmic law, but on exclusion, on the suppression of anything that did not fit its narrow vision of purity. To expand and enforce her Golden Order across all the lands between, Marika needed a champion, a warrior king who could lead her armies and bring the scattered kingdoms and peoples under her rule. She found this champion in Godfrey, a warrior of such might and ferocity that he was known as Huara Lu in his earlier, more savage days. Marika elevated Godfrey to become her consort and the first Elden Lord, a title that made him the earthly counterpart to her divine authority. But Godfrey's strength came with a dangerous edge, a bloodlust so intense it threatened to consume him. To temper this savage nature while preserving his martial prowess, Marika arranged for Sarish, a great lion-like beast, to be bound to Godfrey's back. Sarosh was not merely a companion, but a living restraint, constantly suppressing Godfrey's most violent impulses, allowing him to channel his warrior spirit with discipline and purpose. Thus balanced between civilization and savagery, Godfrey led the Golden Host, Marika's army, on a campaign of conquest that would bring all the lands between under the Erdtree's shadow. He fought the Stormlord in Stormvale Castle, claiming that ancient fortress for the Golden Order. He battled the giants in the north, the ancient dragons in the sky, and countless other powers that resisted Marika's rule. Through blood and iron, the Golden Order's dominion expanded until it encompassed nearly every corner of the known world. Among Marika's children, none embodied the Golden Order's ideals more perfectly than Godwyn, known as Godwyn the Golden. He was the very image of divine nobility, a demigod warrior of exceptional skill, and more remarkably, of genuine virtue and diplomacy. During the war with the ancient dragons, a conflict that had raged between Marika's forces and the dragons led by Dragon Lord Placidosax's successors, Godwyn achieved something that brute force alone could not. Rather than simply slaughtering the dragons, he befriended them. The pivotal moment came when Godwyn faced Fortisax, one of the mightiest of the ancient dragons. Through combat that transformed into mutual respect, Godwyn and Fortisax formed a bond that transcended the war. This friendship became the foundation for peace between dragons and the Golden Order. The Dragon War ended not in extermination, but in integration. The ancient dragons, those magnificent beings who had once served as Elden Lord themselves in an earlier age, were welcomed into Leyndell, the royal capital. Dragon worship became an accepted part of the Golden Order, and the Dragon Cult Knights, warriors who wielded lightning incantations gifted by the dragons, became elite servants of the capital. Godwyn's achievement demonstrated that the Golden Order could be more than just conquest and suppression, that it could unite even ancient enemies under its grace. He became the shining symbol of the Order's potential, beloved by all who knew him, the Golden Prince who seemed destined for eternal glory. Yet even at the height of this golden age, Marika made decisions that hinted at deeper plans and hidden doubts. In an act that shocked the lands between, she banished Godfrey, her loyal Elden Lord, who had conquered the world in her name. After his final victory, when the last worthy foe had been defeated, Marika stripped Godfrey and his most loyal warriors of the Erdtree's grace. The grace, that golden light in the eyes of the blessed that marked them as chosen by the Erdtree, faded from them. They became tarnished, a term of shame, outcasts driven from the lands between to wander in distant lands beyond the fogs. Marika's words to them were cryptic, speaking of how they would live die and be reborn, and that one day they would return, their eyes alight with grace once more, to stand before the Elden Ring. The reason for this banishment remains one of the great mysteries of the age. Some scholars suggest that Marika foresaw a future crisis and was preparing a solution, sending the tarnished away so they could one day return as outsiders, unburdened by the Golden Order's corruption. Others believe she simply had no more use for warriors in an age she believed would be eternal peace. Whatever her true motivation, the banishment of Godfrey and the Tarnished marked a turning point, the first crack in the Golden Order's perfect facade. With Godfrey gone, Marika took a second consort, but this union was stranger than anyone could have imagined. Radagon of the Golden Order, a champion who had fought for Marika's cause and who had married Renala, Queen of the Full Moon and leader of the Academy of Raya Lucaria, was summoned back to Lanedell. The truth, unknown only to a few, was that Radagon and Marika were not simply consort and queen, but two halves of the same being, a single god divided into two bodies. Radagon left Renala and returned to the capital, where he merged with Marika, becoming her consort in a union that was both marriage and reunion with herself. This bizarre arrangement served a political purpose, uniting the golden lineage of Marika with the Carian royal family, bringing the powerful sorcerers of Raya Lucaria under the Golden Order's influence. But the cost was devastating for those left behind. Renala, who had truly loved Radagon, was shattered by his abandonment. The Queen of the Full Moon, once a sorceress of unmatched power and wisdom, fell into despair and madness. She clutched the amber egg Radagon had given her, a gift that contained his love and perhaps something more, and retreated into the grand library of Raya Lucaria, where she would endlessly attempt to use its power to achieve rebirth, seeking perhaps to bring back what she had lost or to remake herself into something that could bear the pain. Her children, Rani, Radon, and Rykard, watched their mothers decline, and the Carian royal family, once proud and independent, fell into shadow, their academy becoming a place of strange obsessions and fractured scholarship rather than the beacon of knowledge it had been. From the union of Marika and Radagon came twins, Michaela and Malenia, and they were born cursed despite their divine parentage, or perhaps because of it. Michaela was afflicted with eternal childhood, his body forever young and small, even as his mind grew to extraordinary brilliance and wisdom. Malenia suffered from something far worse, the scarlet rot, a plague of decay that had been sealed away by a blind swordsman in an earlier age, but now manifested within her divine flesh. The rot was not merely a disease, but a malevolent outer god's influence, constantly threatening to consume her and burst forth to devastate everything around her. These curses were profound mysteries. Some believed they resulted from Marika and Radagon's union being fundamentally unnatural, a single being reproducing with itself, creating offspring whose divine nature was corrupted by this paradox. Others saw the curses as punishments or tests from forces beyond even Marika's control. Michaela, despite his curse, or perhaps driven by it, became the most intellectually gifted of all the demigods. His compassion and wisdom were legendary, and he was beloved by many who saw in him hope for a better world. But his primary obsession was curing his sister's affliction. He delved deep into the study of the scarlet rot and the nature of the outer gods, seeking a way to free Malenia from her suffering. His research led him to develop unalloyed gold, a pure form of gold that resisted the influence of outer gods. From this, He crafted a needle, a delicate instrument that could be inserted into the body to hold the progression of outer god influences. The unalloyed gold needle represented a direct challenge to the cosmic order, a mortal, or at least a demigod, creating something that could resist the will of entities as powerful as the greater will or the god of scarlet rot. But Michaela's ambitions extended beyond even this. Disillusioned with the Golden Order and the Air Tree, which he saw as flawed and unable to help those the Order deemed imperfect, he began cultivating his own tree, the Halig Tree. This was an attempt to create an alternative to the Erd Tree, a sanctuary where those rejected by the Golden Order, the Omens, the Albinorics, the afflicted, could find acceptance and grace. The Halig Tree grew in secret, watered by Michaela's own blood, a monument to his vision of a more compassionate world. Millennia, the blade of Michaela, became her brother's protector and champion. Despite the scarlet rot constantly eating away at her, causing her to lose first her sight and then limbs that had to be replaced with prosthetics of unalloyed gold crafted by Michaela, she trained herself to become perhaps the greatest warrior in all the lands between. She mastered the art of the waterfowl, a sword technique of devastating speed and precision, and she never once knew defeat in battle, at least not in any conventional sense. Her devotion to Michaela was absolute, and she became a symbol of resilience, proving that even those cursed and broken could achieve greatness through will and dedication. Yet her curse was also a weapon of terrible destruction, for when pushed to her absolute limit, the scarlet rot would bloom from her body in a catastrophic explosion, devastating entire regions and leaving them poisoned wastelands for generations. Throughout this age, the Erd Tree itself stood at the center of existence, its golden boughs stretching across the sky, visible from every corner of the lands between. Its grace, that golden light, fell upon the chosen, marking them as blessed and guiding them toward greatness. The Erd Tree was more than a symbol. It was the metaphysical anchor of the Golden Order, the source of immortality, the destination of souls, and the promise of eternal life under Marika's rule. Cities and kingdoms oriented themselves toward it, both literally and spiritually. The age of the Erd Tree, under Marika's rule, appeared to be the fulfillment of the Greater Will's design, a perfect order that would last forever, where death had been conquered, where the demigods ruled as immortal princes and princesses, and where the grace of gold touched all the worthy. Yet beneath this golden surface, contradictions accumulated, curses festered, the banished tarnished wandered in distant lands, and Marika herself, for reasons none could fathom, seemed to harbor doubts about the very order she had created and enforced with such terrible determination. Our journey through the lands between brings us now to a pivotal moment, a fracture in the Golden Order's seemingly eternal reign, occurring sometime after Marika's ascension and the flourishing of the Erd Tree, but definitively pre-shattering. We are entering the era known as the Golden Order, a period of relative peace and prosperity, yet one secretly seething with discontent and dark machinations. This is the story of the Night of Black Knives, an event so cataclysmic it would irrevocably alter the fate of the entire world. The seeds of this tragedy were sown long before the actual night itself, rooted in Marika's own complex relationship with death. In a move that would prove to be both prescient and catastrophic, Marika, the Eternal Queen, removed the rune of death from the Elden Ring. The Elden Ring, for those unfamiliar, is the fundamental concept of the world itself, a collection of great runes that govern all reality, including life and death. By excising the rune of death, Marika effectively removed true death from the lands between, ushering in an age where souls would return to the Erd Tree, endlessly recycling. This powerful, terrifying fragment of the Elden Ring, now a standalone entity capable of bestowing true death, was then entrusted to her shadow, Malekith, the Black Blade. Malekith, a beastman of immense power and unwavering loyalty, was tasked with containing the rune within his fortress, Farum Azula, a crumbling city suspended in time far above the clouds. His duty was absolute, to prevent the rune of death from ever being unleashed again. This act, while seemingly intended to preserve the Golden Order, inadvertently created the very weapon that would ultimately shatter it. Meanwhile, a different kind of discontent was brewing within the hallowed halls of the Golden Order. Rani the Witch, an Empyrean, found herself chafing under the oppressive weight of her destiny. An Empyrean, by definition, is a demigod chosen by the two fingers, emissaries of the greater will, one of the outer gods, as a potential successor to Marika. This divine selection, however, came with a predetermined path, a lack of agency that Rani found intolerable. She resented her fate, viewing it as a gilded cage, a puppet show orchestrated by the greater will, the enigmatic cosmic entity that governs the Golden Order. Rani yearned for true freedom, for the ability to forge her own path, even if it meant defying the very fabric of her existence. Her desire for liberation was so profound that she sought to escape the greater will's influence entirely, a feat that would require a radical, unthinkable act. To achieve her audacious goal, Rani began to weave a complex web of conspiracy, reaching out to other demigods who, for their own reasons, harbored resentment towards the Golden Order. Among her earliest and most significant allies was Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy. Rykard, a son of Radagon and Renala, was already deeply entrenched in his own rebellion against the Erd Tree, having embraced forbidden sorceries and a philosophy of defiance that would eventually lead him to merge with the blasphemous god-devouring serpent. While their ultimate goals differed, their shared animosity towards the Golden Order and the Greater Will forged a temporary yet potent alliance. The exact nature of their collaboration remains shrouded in mystery, but it is clear that Rykard's willingness to challenge established authority made him a valuable, if dangerous, conspirator. Other demigods, their identities largely obscured by the mists of history, also lent their support, or at least their tacit approval, to Rani's burgeoning rebellion, each with their own grievances, against Marika's seemingly unshakable rule. As her plans solidified, Rani understood that direct confrontation with the Golden Order was a fool's errand. She needed a surgical strike, a precise act of defiance that would achieve her aims without igniting an all-out war she couldn't win. Her attention turned to a clandestine group known as the Black Knife Assassins. These were not ordinary killers. They were a specialized unit of Numen women, a race known for their exceptional intellect, and in some cases, their connection to the Eternal Cities and their ancient, forbidden magics. It is highly probable that Rani made contact with these assassins through her enigmatic mentor, Rena. Rena, often conflated with Rani herself due to their shared name, Rani's full name is Rena, or Lunar Princess Rani, served as a guide and confidant, possessing knowledge and connections that would have been invaluable to Rani's clandestine operations. The Numen, being an ancient race distinct from the humans of the lands between, likely harbored their own historical grievances against the Golden Order, making them fertile ground for Rani's persuasive arguments. The true genius and terrifying audacity of Rani's plan lay in its centerpiece, the acquisition of a fragment of the Rune of Death itself. With the assistance of her allies and the Black Knife assassins, Rani orchestrated the unthinkable, the theft of a piece of the Rune of Death from Malekith's heavily guarded sanctuary in Farum Azula. This was no small feat. Malekith, as Marika's shadow, was a formidable guardian, and Farum Azula, a place outside of time, was virtually impenetrable. The specifics of how they managed to breach his defenses and acquire the fragment are not fully detailed in the historical records, but it speaks to the immense power and cunning of Rani and her conspirators. This stolen fragment, imbued with the power of true death, was the key to Rani's liberation and the Golden Order's undoing. Once the fragment of the Rune of Death was secured, it was not used to unleash widespread destruction, at least not immediately. Instead, it was meticulously crafted into the very weapons wielded by the Black Knife assassins. These were not ordinary blades. They were infused with the power of destined death, meaning any wound inflicted by them would bypass the Erdtree's cycle of rebirth and inflict true, irreversible death. The Black Knives, now imbued with this terrifying power, became the instruments of Rani's grand design, a testament to her meticulous planning and ruthless determination. The assassins themselves, sworn to Rani's cause, were now equipped with the means to strike at the very heart of the Golden Order's immortality. Finally, the stage was set for the night that would forever scar the lands between, the Night of Black Knives. Under the cloak of darkness, the Black Knife assassins, their movements silent and swift, infiltrated the Erdtree capital, Lindell. This was the seat of Marika's power, the heart of the Golden Order, and a place thought to be impregnable. Their ability to bypass its formidable defenses speaks volumes about the intelligence and coordination of Rani's network, and perhaps even internal complicity. The capital, usually bathed in the golden glow of the Erdtree, was plunged into a night of terror. Their primary target, guided by Rani's precise instructions, was Godwyn the Golden. Godwyn, Marika's beloved son, was a beacon of the Golden Order, revered for his strength, charisma, and unwavering loyalty. He represented everything Rani sought to dismantle. The Black Knife assassins, utilizing their newfound power, brutally murdered Godwyn the Golden. This was not merely an assassination, it was a ritualistic killing designed to achieve a very specific and horrific outcome. The nature of the Rune of Death's application during Godwyn's murder is crucial to understanding the subsequent events. While Godwyn's soul was undeniably slain, his body, due to the unique properties of the stolen Rune of Death fragment, did not perish in the conventional sense. Instead, his soul died, but his physical form continued to exist, albeit in a grotesque and corrupted state. This horrifying phenomenon transformed him into the Prince of Death, a harbinger of true death and decay. The Rune of Death, used in this specific manner, severed the connection between his soul and his physical form, preventing his soul from returning to the Erdtree, yet leaving his body animated by a twisted, unnatural life. In the immediate aftermath of his murder, Godwyn's soulless body was buried at the roots of the Erdtree. This act, intended perhaps to contain the horror, only served to amplify it. From his corrupted form, a pervasive blight began to spread. Deathroot. Deathroot, a manifestation of Godwyn's unnatural death, began to infect the very foundations of the Erdtree, reaching out like a cancerous growth across the lands between. It corrupted the earth, twisted living creatures into grotesque forms, and fundamentally disrupted the natural cycle of life and death established by Marika's removal of the Rune of Death. The Prince of Death, though physically entombed, became a pervasive, insidious force, a constant reminder of the knight's atrocities. Crucially, the Knight of Black Knives was not solely about Godwin's demise. Simultaneously with the assassination, Rani executed the second, equally audacious part of her plan. Using the very same stolen rune of death, she committed an act of self-murder. However, like Godwin's death, this was not a conventional suicide. Rani used the fragment of the rune of death to kill her own Empyrean flesh, severing the connection between her spirit and her physical body. This act was not about ending her existence, but about freeing her spirit from her predetermined corporeal form. Rani's act of self-murder was a profound declaration of independence. By destroying her physical body, she effectively escaped the control of the greater will. Her spirit, now unburdened by the flesh chosen for her by an outer god, was free to pursue her own destiny, to walk a path entirely of her own choosing. This was the ultimate act of defiance against the cosmic forces that sought to dictate her fate. Her spirit, now inhabiting a dull body, would embark on a solitary journey, forever seeking to escape the influence of the greater will and usher in an age of stars, a new order where the moon and cold, distant stars would guide the fate of the lands between, rather than the fiery Erd tree. The Knight of Black Knives, therefore, marks not just a single tragedy, but a confluence of events that irrevocably altered the course of history. It was the first recorded death of a demigod, a shattering of the Golden Order's illusion of invincibility. This unprecedented act of violence and defiance sent shockwaves through the lands between, creating an irreparable rift within the Golden Order and igniting the sparks that would eventually lead to the devastating conflict known as the Shattering. The consequences of this single night would ripple through generations, shaping the very landscape and destiny of Elden Ring's world. The reverberations of the Knight of Black Knives, which saw the assassination of Godwin the Golden, echoed through the very fabric of the lands between, ushering in an era of unprecedented chaos and despair known simply as the Shattering. This cataclysmic period, directly following the Night of Black Knives, marks a pivotal turning point in the history of the lands between, a time when the divine order unraveled and the very foundations of reality were rent asunder. In the immediate aftermath of Godwin's demise, Queen Marika the Eternal, the vessel of the Elden Ring and the reigning deity of the lands between, was consumed by a grief so profound, a rage so absolute, that it transcended mere mortal emotion. Her beloved son, the first of the demigods to fall, had been cruelly taken, his soul destroyed while his body remained, a grotesque mockery of life. This unbearable loss, coupled with a burgeoning defiance against the cosmic order that had seemingly allowed such an atrocity to occur, drove Marika to an act of unimaginable rebellion. With a force born of both sorrow and fury, she shattered the Elden Ring itself. This was not a mere symbolic gesture, but a physical act of immense power, splintering the very embodiment of order and causality within the lands between. The Elden Ring, a mystical artifact representing the fundamental laws of the world, was torn into countless fragments, its golden light extinguished, its unifying power dispersed. This act, born of a mother's pain and a queen's defiance, irrevocably altered the destiny of her realm. The consequences of Marika's audacious act were swift and devastating. The greater will, the enigmatic outer god that had guided and empowered Marika and established the Golden Order, was as one might expect from a cosmic entity, whose very essence is order and control, utterly enraged by this profound betrayal. Viewing Marika's shattering of the Elden Ring as an unforgivable act of insubordination and sacrilege, the greater will, in its infinite and inscrutable judgment, abandoned Marika. More than that, it effectively abandoned the entire lands between, withdrawing its direct influence and leaving the realm adrift in a sea of cosmic uncertainty. This withdrawal of divine favor plunged the lands between into a spiritual and existential void, stripping away the celestial guidance that had underpinned its very existence for millennia. The golden light that had once emanated from the Erd tree, a symbol of the greater will's presence, began to dim, foreshadowing the decay that would soon consume the land. It is crucial to understand that the Night of Black Knives, which immediately preceded and directly precipitated the shattering, involved a deeply disturbing act, the theft of the Rune of Death. This potent fragment of the Elden Ring, which had been sealed away by Marika herself in an attempt to prevent true death from entering the world, and thus solidify the Golden Order's eternal dominion, was stolen by Rani the Witch and her shadowy conspirators. Their intention was to use its power to orchestrate the death of a demigod's soul without destroying their body, a ritual that culminated in the assassination of Godwyn the Golden. Godwyn, the firstborn son of Marika and Godfrey, the revered golden lineage, was the unfortunate target of this dark ritual. His soul, the essence of his being, was utterly destroyed by the stolen rune of death, yet his physical form remained, a chilling testament to the twisted magic employed. This unprecedented event, a death in which the soul perishes but the body endures, had unforeseen and horrific consequences. Godwyn's soulless body, though technically alive, became a conduit for a grotesque form of undeath, a blight that began to spread throughout the lands between. These unfortunate beings, known as those who live in death, are not true undead in the traditional sense, but rather individuals whose souls have been severed from their bodies, leaving them in a state of eternal, decaying animation. The spread of those who live in death became a grim testament to the perversion of natural law unleashed by the Rune of Death's misuse. With the Elden Ring shattered and its unifying power dispersed, its fragments, now known as Great Runes, became objects of immense power and irresistible allure. Marika's children, the demigods, each of whom possessed a shard of the divine essence, instinctively gravitated towards these powerful remnants. Driven by ambition, a desire for power, or perhaps a desperate attempt to restore some semblance of order, they each claimed one or more of these great runes. In doing so, they became known as shard-bearers, each wielding a piece of the shattered cosmic order, their individual power amplified to godlike proportions. These great runes, though fragments, still held immense power, capable of bestowing extraordinary abilities and influence upon their bearers, further fueling the burgeoning conflicts. Among these powerful shard-bearers was Millennia, the Blade of Miquella, a figure of tragic beauty and fearsome might. Millennia, however, bore a terrible affliction, the Scarlet Rot. This devastating and incurable disease, a malevolent outer god's influence, slowly consumed her body, causing excruciating pain and a gradual decay of her flesh. Despite her immense skill as a warrior, the Scarlet Rot was a constant debilitating burden, a source of both physical agony and profound vulnerability. Her struggle against the rot became a defining characteristic of her existence, shaping her decisions and her fate. Another formidable shard-bearer was Radon, the Star Scourge, a colossal warrior of immense strength and a master of gravity magic. Radon, driven by a deep sense of loyalty to his Carian royal family and a profound understanding of cosmic destiny, used his immense power to perform an astonishing feat. He halted the very stars in their courses. This monumental act was not merely a display of raw power, but a desperate attempt to prevent the fate of the Carian royal family, a fate tied to the movement of celestial bodies and the influence of the full moon. By freezing the stars, Radon sought to disrupt the cosmic prophecies that threatened his kin, effectively defying the natural order of the cosmos in a desperate bid to protect his lineage. His actions, while heroic in their intent, had far reaching and unintended consequences, further destabilizing the delicate balance of the lands between. The stage was now set for an unparalleled conflict. With the Elden Ring shattered, the greater will withdrawn, and powerful shard-bearers vying for dominion, a devastating war erupted among the demigods. This was not a localized skirmish, but a sprawling, brutal conflict that engulfed the entirety of the lands between. Each demigod, armed with their great runes and commanding vast armies, sought to seize control of the shattered remnants of the Elden Ring, and in doing so, claim ultimate authority over the realm. The motivations varied, from genuine desire to restore order to naked ambition for power, but the outcome was universally destructive. The lands between, once a realm of golden prosperity under the Golden Order, were scarred beyond recognition by the relentless warfare. Cities were razed, landscapes were desecrated, and countless lives were lost in the brutal clashes between the demigod armies. The Golden Order, once the bedrock of society, began to crumble under the weight of the conflict. Its institutions weakened, its authority challenged, and its very tenets questioned in the face of such widespread devastation. The era of peace and stability was definitively over, replaced by an age of fire and blood. The most infamous and destructive clash of this period occurred between two of the most powerful shard-bearers, Millennia, the Blade of Miquella, and Radon, the Star Scourge. Their epic confrontation took place in the desolate wastes of Caelid, a region already blighted by the lingering effects of ancient wars. The battle was a cataclysmic display of power, a clash of titans that shook the very foundations of the land. In a desperate act, pushed to her limits by Rodden's overwhelming might, Millennia unleashed the full, unbridled power of the Scarlet Rot. This devastating release transformed Caelid into a festering wasteland, a testament to the destructive potential of her affliction. The Scarlet Rot, unleashed in such a concentrated burst, not only ravaged the landscape, but also inflicted a terrible fate upon Radon. Though he survived the encounter, the Scarlet Rot drove him utterly mad, leaving him a shadow of his former self, a mindless beast consumed by the disease, eternally feasting on the corpses of fallen warriors in the blighted wastes. This battle, a Pyrrhic victory for Millennia, left both combatants broken and the land irrevocably blighted. Amidst this widespread devastation, Miquella, Millennia's twin brother and a demigod of immense wisdom and compassion, sought a different path. Recognizing the futility of the war and the suffering it inflicted, and deeply concerned by Millennia's incurable scarlet rot, Miquella embarked on an ambitious and deeply personal endeavor. He sought to create a haven, a sanctuary free from the influence of the Golden Order and its rigid doctrines, a place where he could potentially cure Millennia's affliction and perhaps even transcend the limitations of the existing cosmic order. To this end, he began the arduous task of creating the Halig Tree. This colossal, mystical tree grown from Miquella's own essence, was intended to be a haven for all who were forsaken by the Golden Order, a place of healing and rebirth. Miquella poured his very being into its creation, hoping to cultivate a new, purer form of life, one unburdened by the flaws of the existing divine order. However, Miquella's noble aspirations were tragically interrupted. Moog, the Lord of Blood, a formidable demigod and a devotee of an abhorrent outer god known as the Formless Mother, harbored a dark ambition. He abducted the slumbering Miquella from the sanctuary of the Haligtree. Moog's twisted plan was to raise Miquella to godhood, not through Miquella's own benevolent intentions, but through a corrupt and ritualistic process, hoping to become Miquella's consort and establish a new, blood-soaked dynasty. This abduction, a profound act of violation, further complicated the already chaotic political landscape of the lands between, adding another layer of malevolent intrigue to the ongoing war. The war among the demigods, despite its ferocity and the immense suffering it caused, eventually devolved into a stalemate. No single demigod, despite their immense power and the great runes they wielded, was able to achieve a decisive victory or claim full dominion over the shattered Elden Ring. The conflict became a war of attrition, a grinding, endless struggle that left the lands between utterly devastated and its inhabitants in despair. The once golden age had given way to an age of fragmentation, a land without a clear ruler, awaiting a champion to mend its broken pieces. This prolonged stalemate, a testament to the equal yet destructive power of the Shardbearers, effectively brought the age of the Shattering to a bitter and unresolved close, leaving the lands between in a state of perpetual, agonizing limbo. As the cataclysm of the Shattering tore through the lands between, plunging the demigods into a brutal war for dominion, a different kind of horror was unfolding, one deeply intertwined with the fate of an Empyrean. Our timeline now brings us to the period during and post-Shattering, a time marked by the insidious spread of the Scarlet Rot and the tragic tale of Malenia, Blade of Miquella. Malenia, one of Marika's Empyrean children, was born into a world already tainted by an ancient, malevolent force. From the moment of her birth, she was afflicted by the Scarlet Rot, a devastating plague linked to an outer god of decay and pestilence. This wasn't a mere illness, but a curse, a fundamental corruption of her very being. Her limbs were prosthetics, replacements for what the rot had consumed even in her infancy, a constant, agonizing reminder of the alien entity that sought to claim her. This inherent vulnerability made her a vessel, a potential avatar for the outer god's full manifestation, a horrific fate that she and those who loved her desperately fought against. The rot was not just a physical ailment, it was a spiritual and existential threat, threatening to dissolve her identity and unleash unimaginable destruction upon the lands between. Witnessing his beloved twin sister's suffering, Miquella, another Empyrean of extraordinary intellect and compassion, dedicated his entire existence to finding a cure for Malenia's scarlet rot. He was a prodigy, a being of immense power and insight, and he poured all his efforts into understanding and ultimately eradicating this blight. His ambition was grand, his love boundless. To this end, Miquella began the construction of the Haligtree, a colossal, artificial tree designed to be a sanctuary, a haven where life could flourish untainted by the Golden Order or the encroaching rot. The Haligtree was more than just a refuge. It was intended to be a place of healing, a spiritual and biological crucible where Michaela believed he could cultivate a remedy, perhaps even a new form of life, capable of resisting the outer god's influence. He poured his own essence into its growth, sacrificing his own potential for godhood to nurture this grand project, hoping to create a world where millennia could finally be free. The Haligtree represented Michaela's unwavering hope and his profound understanding of the interconnectedness of life and decay. However, the War of the Shattering raged on, and Millennia, despite her debilitating affliction, was compelled to act. The mighty General Radon, one of the most fearsome demigods, had used his immense gravitational powers to halt the stars in their courses. This act was not merely a display of strength, it was a strategic move to prevent the influence of the greater will's rival outer gods, particularly the fate weaving forces associated with the stars, from interfering with his ambitions or the Golden Order's dominion. But by stopping the stars, Radon inadvertently disrupted the natural order, trapping the lands between in a stagnant cosmic alignment. This cosmic stagnation, in turn, hindered Michaela's efforts to cure millennia, as the flow of fate and destiny, crucial to his intricate magical workings, was interrupted. Millennia, accompanied by her loyal Cleanrot Knights, a devoted order of warriors who swore allegiance to her despite the risk of infection, journeyed to Caelid, a desolate and war-torn region, to confront Radon. Her mission was clear: defeat Radon, release the stars, and allow Michaela's cure to progress. This journey was a testament to her unwavering love for her brother and her fierce determination to overcome her curse. The ensuing confrontation in Caelid was nothing short of apocalyptic. Millennia, driven to the brink by Radon's overwhelming power and the sheer desperation of her cause, unleashed the full, terrifying power of the Scarlet Aeonia. This was not merely a powerful attack, but a catastrophic release of the outer god of Rot's essence, a desperate, last-ditch effort that transformed her into a living bomb of pestilence. The landscape of Caelid was utterly devastated, scorched, and corrupted by the scarlet bloom, becoming a festering wound upon the earth. Radon, despite his immense strength and resilience, was overwhelmed and infected by the virulent plague. His mind shattered, his body ravaged, he was reduced to a mindless beast, forever condemned to wander the wastes he once defended, a tragic victim of the very power he sought to control. This act, while achieving its immediate goal of defeating Radon and releasing the stars, came at an unimaginable cost. In the aftermath of this cataclysmic battle, Millennia herself succumbed to the immense strain. The release of such devastating power, coupled with the inherent weakness of her rot-afflicted body, plunged her into a deep coma. Her loyal Cleanrot Knight, Finley, a testament to the unwavering devotion of Millennia's followers, performed an incredible feat of endurance and loyalty. Despite the dangers of the blighted landscape and the overwhelming odds, Finley carried Millennia's comatose form across the entirety of the lands between, battling countless foes and enduring unimaginable hardships, eventually returning her to the sanctuary of the Haligtree. This arduous journey underscores the profound bond between Millennia and her knights, a loyalty that transcended even the threat of the rot itself. The consequences of Millennia's unleashing of the Scarlet Aeonia were swift and horrifying. The Scarlet Rot, now fully unleashed and concentrated in Caelid, spread rapidly and uncontrollably throughout the region. The land itself became a grotesque tableau of decay, its soil poisoned, its waters turned to putrid swamps. The creatures inhabiting Caelid were twisted and corrupted, transformed into hideous, aggressive monsters, their bodies festering with the virulent plague. Even some demigods, like Radon, were irrevocably tainted, their minds and bodies ravaged by the insidious blight. Caelid became a living testament to the outer god of Rot's destructive power, a constant, agonizing reminder of Millennia's desperate act. The vibrant ecosystem of the region was replaced by a landscape of perpetual suffering and slow, agonizing death. Amidst the desolation of Caelid, one of Millennia's clean-rot knights, Commander O'Neill, remained steadfast in his duty. He stood guard over the heart of the Aeonia swamp, the epicenter of Millennia's devastating bloom and the remnants of the battle. His presence was not just a protective measure for the blighted land itself, but a silent vigil, a testament to the enduring loyalty of the Clean-Rot Knights. He was a sentinel, a guardian of the Rot's most concentrated manifestation, ensuring that its destructive power remained contained, or perhaps waiting for a sign of Millennia's return or Miquella's cure. His unwavering commitment in such a desolate and dangerous place speaks volumes about the depth of his oath to Millennia. Adding another layer of unsettling intrigue to the Rot's spread was the presence of Gowry, a mysterious scholar deeply engrossed in the study of the Scarlet Rot. Gowry was not merely an observer. He was an active participant in the Rot's machinations, albeit in a subtle and insidious way. He sought to nurture Millicent, a young woman who was a kindred of Millennia, meaning she shared a biological and spiritual connection to the Empyrean and the Rot. Gowry's ultimate goal was not to cure the Rot, but to see it bloom anew, to witness its full, terrifying power manifest once more. He believed that through Millicent, the Rot could achieve its ultimate expression, perhaps even fulfilling the outer god's desire for a complete takeover of the lands between. His actions reveal the sinister cult surrounding the outer god of Rot, individuals who actively sought to accelerate its spread and power. Millennia's curse, therefore, was not a singular event, but a constant, ongoing struggle against the outer god of Rot. It was a relentless battle for control of her own body and soul, a fight to prevent the alien entity from fully consuming her and manifesting its full, destructive power through her. Every moment was a testament to her immense willpower and her profound desire to resist the fate imposed upon her. Her existence was a delicate balance, a constant dance on the precipice of complete annihilation, with the outer god always lurking, always seeking an opportunity to breach her defenses and unleash its blight upon the world. Despite the horrifying nature of their affliction, the Clean-Rot Knights, Millennia's devoted warriors, remained steadfast in their duty. They were not immune to the Rot. In fact, many of them were slowly succumbing to its insidious effects, their bodies twisting and decaying, their minds perhaps even subtly influenced. Yet their loyalty to Millennia transcended their own suffering. They continued to protect her, to fight for her, and to uphold their vows, even as the Rot gnawed at their very essence. Their unwavering devotion is a powerful testament to Millennia's charisma and the profound sense of purpose she inspired in her followers, even in the face of such a terrifying curse. Back within the sanctuary of the Haligtree, Miquella, in his self-imposed slumber, continued his tireless efforts to cure Millennia. His sleep was not one of rest, but of profound magical and spiritual concentration, a state in which he could exert his will and influence the growth of the Haligtree and the development of his cure. However, his ambitious plans were tragically interrupted by the arrival of Moog, Lord of Blood, another demigod driven by his own twisted ambitions. Mog, seeking to establish his own dynasty and become the consort of an Empyrean, abducted the slumbering Miquella from the Haligtree. This act was a devastating blow to Millennia's hopes for a cure, as Miquella's vital work was halted, and his fate became intertwined with Mog's dark rituals. The abduction of Miquella left Millennia without her greatest champion and deepened the despair surrounding her curse. Meanwhile, in the blighted wastes of Caelid, the remnants of Rodden's once mighty forces continued to wander, now maddened and corrupted by the pervasive influence of the Scarlet Rot. These soldiers, once proud warriors, were reduced to mindless husks, their bodies festering, their minds broken. They perpetuated the land's suffering, becoming agents of the rot's spread, attacking any who dared to venture into their blighted territory. Their tragic fate served as a constant, horrifying reminder of the rot's destructive power and the irreversible damage inflicted upon Caelid. Throughout all these events, the outer god of rot subtly influenced the unfolding narrative, a silent, malevolent puppeteer pulling strings from beyond the veil. It did not directly intervene, but its presence was felt in every festering wound, every twisted creature, and every moment of Millennia's agony. Its ultimate goal was clear: to fully manifest through Millennia, its chosen vessel, and spread its blight across the entirety of the lands between, transforming the vibrant world into a rotting, decaying wasteland. The outer god of rot was a constant unseen threat, its influence a pervasive shadow over the entire era, shaping destinies and driving the tragic events of this period. Its subtle machinations underscore the cosmic horror at the heart of the Lands Between's conflicts, a struggle not just between demigods, but between primal, indifferent forces that seek to reshape reality itself. The Scarlet Rot, therefore, is not merely a disease, but a manifestation of an alien will, a cosmic plague seeking to consume and redefine existence. Following the cataclysmic events of the Shattering, a period of intense conflict and profound upheaval, we arrive at the post-Shattering era, a time dominated by the warring demigods. It is within this tumultuous landscape that the tragic tale of Miquella's slumber and Mog's abduction unfolds, a pivotal moment that irrevocably shaped the destiny of the Lands Between. Miquella, an Empyrean, one of the rare individuals chosen by the Greater Will, an outer god and the primary divine influence in the Lands Between, to potentially ascend to full godhood, and the twin brother of the formidable Millennia, Blade of Miquella, found himself burdened by a unique and cruel curse. Both he and Millennia were born with afflictions that defied conventional understanding. Millennia suffered from the Scarlet Rot, a virulent and destructive disease that slowly consumed her body and mind, while Miquella was cursed with eternal youth, forever trapped in the physical form of a child. This inability to mature, to grow into his full potential, was a profound impediment to his aspirations and a constant source of frustration. Driven by an unwavering love for his sister and a burning desire to alleviate her suffering, Miquella dedicated himself to finding a cure for the Scarlet Rot. He understood that the existing Golden Order, the religious and political system established by Queen Marika and influenced by the Greater Will, was incapable of providing the answers he sought. The Golden Order, in its rigid adherence to established doctrines, often rejected or cast out those who deviated from its perceived perfection, such as the Omen and the Misbegotten. Miquella envisioned a new, more inclusive Golden Order, one free from the restrictive influence of the Greater Will and its often unforgiving tenets. He believed that by creating such an order, he could not only cure millennia, but also provide sanctuary for all those deemed unwanted by the prevailing societal norms. To achieve this ambitious goal, Miquella embarked on a monumental undertaking, the creation of the Haligtree. This colossal, mystical tree was not merely a physical structure, but a living testament to Miquella's potent will and his mastery over unalloyed gold. Unalloyed gold, a unique and purified form of the precious metal, possessed extraordinary properties, particularly its ability to ward off the insidious influences of outer gods, those cosmic entities that sought to impose their will upon the lands between. Miquella meticulously cultivated the Haligtree, pouring his own essence and power into its growth, intending it to be a sanctuary, a haven where the cursed and the rejected could find refuge and healing, shielded from the malevolent forces that plagued their existence. Through his profound understanding and manipulation of unalloyed gold, Miquella developed an unparalleled innovation, the unalloyed needle. This remarkable artifact was imbued with the power to stave off the influence of outer gods, including even the destructive power of the frenzied flame, another potent and chaotic outer god that threatened to consume all life in a fiery madness. The unalloyed needle represented Miquella's ultimate triumph over external divine interference, a tangible symbol of his commitment to self-determination and liberation from cosmic manipulation. It offered a glimmer of hope for those afflicted by the insidious whispers of these otherworldly entities. As the Haligtree flourished, Miquella actively established it as a haven, a welcoming refuge for those who had been cast aside by the rigid doctrines of the Golden Order. This included the misbegotten, a race of beast-like humanoids often subjected to prejudice and persecution, and the omen, individuals born with horns and other physical deformities that were seen as curses and often led to their imprisonment or ritualistic execution. Within the protective embrace of the Haligtree, these outcasts found acceptance, a place where their unique existences were not only tolerated but celebrated, a stark contrast to the unforgiving world outside its golden boughs. Miquella's vision was one of unity and healing, a testament to his compassionate nature and his unwavering belief in the inherent worth of all life. Having laid the groundwork for his new order and created a sanctuary for the downtrodden, Miquella then made a momentous decision, one that he believed was essential for his ultimate transformation and the fulfillment of his grand design. He entered a cocoon within the heart of the Haligtree. This self-imposed slumber was not merely a retreat, but a deliberate act of metamorphosis. Miquella intended to mature into a true god, shedding his cursed eternal youth and ascending to a higher state of being. He firmly believed that only as a fully realized god could he wield the power necessary to definitively cure Millennia's scarlet rot, to finally free her from the agonizing grip of her debilitating affliction. His slumber was a calculated risk, a period of vulnerability undertaken with the highest of stakes. However, fate, or perhaps the machinations of other powerful entities, had a cruel twist in store for Miquella. During his critical period of slumber, a chain of events unfolded that would leave him tragically vulnerable. Millennia, ever the fiercely protective sister and an unparalleled warrior, received intelligence of a grave threat to the lands between. General Radon, one of the most powerful demigods and a formidable warrior, had succumbed to the scarlet rot, unleashing its devastating power across Kaelid, a vast and blighted region. Recognizing the immense danger posed by Radon's uncontrolled power, Millennia made the difficult decision to depart the Haligtree. Her mission to confront Radon and prevent the further spread of the rot, even if it meant leaving her beloved brother in his vulnerable cocooned state. Her departure, while born of necessity and a sense of duty, inadvertently created the perfect opportunity for a malevolent force to strike. It was at this precise moment, with Millennia absent and Michaela deep within his transformative slumber, that Mog, Lord of Blood, made his move. Mog, a demigod and an omen himself, was a figure steeped in darkness and driven by an insatiable ambition. He was a devout follower of the Formless Mother, an outer god of primordial blood and forbidden desires, whose whispers had long corrupted his mind and fueled his twisted aspirations. The Formless Mother promised Mog immense power and a new dynasty, one built upon the foundation of blood and sacrifice. To achieve this, Mog believed he needed a consort of unparalleled divine potential, and Michaela, an Empyrean on the cusp of godhood, was the perfect candidate. Driven by these dark whispers and a fervent belief in his destiny, Mog orchestrated a daring and audacious infiltration of the Haligtree. Despite the Haligtree's formidable defenses and the presence of Michaela's loyal knights, Mog, with his mastery over blood magic and his cunning, managed to penetrate its inner sanctum. His objective was clear: to abduct Michaela. With brutal efficiency, Mog tore Michaela's slumbering body from its protective cocoon, a violent act that not only interrupted Michaela's crucial transformation, but also inflicted a profound trauma upon the nascent god. The delicate process of Michaela's maturation was violently severed, leaving him in a state of suspended animation, neither fully awake nor fully transformed. Having successfully abducted his prize, Mog then transported Michaela's cocooned form to his hidden lair, the formidable Mogwin Palace. This sprawling subterranean fortress was located deep within the cavernous expanse of the Seofa River, a hidden realm far beneath the surface of the lands between. Mogwin Palace was a place of ritual and sacrifice, a testament to Mog's devotion to the Formless Mother and his unholy ambitions. Here, in this secluded and blood-soaked sanctuary, Mog intended to complete Michaela's interrupted ascension, but under his own terms and for his own nefarious purposes. Mog's ultimate goal was to raise Michaela to godhood, but not as the benevolent deity Michaela himself envisioned. Instead, Mog sought to elevate Michaela under the corrupting influence of the Formless Mother, to mold him into a divine consort who would rule alongside him in a new, blood-soaked dynasty, the Mogwin dynasty. To hasten Michaela's awakening and to imbue him with the Formless Mother's power, Mog engaged in a grotesque ritual, feeding Michaela's cocooned form with his own blood. This act was meant to accelerate the godhood process, to force Michaela's transformation into a being aligned with the Formless Mother's dark will. However, despite Mog's relentless efforts and his constant infusions of blood, Michaela remained in a state of suspended animation within his cocoon at Mogwin Palace. The violent abduction had irrevocably disrupted his natural maturation process. His awakening was incomplete. His transformation stalled. He was a god in waiting, perpetually on the precipice of emergence, yet unable to fully manifest his divine power. Michaela's tragic fate, trapped in an eternal slumber and subjected to Mog's twisted rituals, became one of the most disturbing mysteries of the lands between, a testament to the brutal ambition of one demigod and the profound vulnerability of even the most powerful beings. His potential, once so bright and full of promise, was now held captive, waiting for an unknown future. While Michela was undergoing his unending slumber and Mog was enacting his vile abduction, a far more insidious corruption was quietly, relentlessly spreading across the lands between, a direct consequence of the Night of Black Knives. We now arrive at timeline entry number 8, Godwin's undead corruption, an ongoing blight that began immediately after his assassination and continues to plague the land. Godwin the Golden, once the beloved firstborn of Marika, now exists as a grotesque mockery of life. His soul, severed from his body by the Black Knives' ritualistic attack, was meant to ascend to the Erd Tree, as is the fate of all those blessed by grace. However, the unique nature of his death, a death of the soul alone, left his physical form animated by a malign, unholy vitality. This soulless husk, the Prince of Death, continues to live, albeit in a state of horrific undeath, and it is this existence that serves as the genesis of the Deathroot's proliferation. Interred deep beneath the roots of the very Erd Tree he was meant to protect, Godwin's corrupted body acts as a festering heart, pumping the insidious Deathroot throughout the lands between. Imagine a cancerous growth, its tendrils reaching out, infecting the very foundations of reality. This Deathroot is not merely a plant, it is a manifestation of his undeath, a physical embodiment of the unholy corruption that gnaws at the fabric of the Golden Order. It warps the natural cycle of life and death, creating an abomination, those who live in death. The spread of Deathroot is pervasive, its influence felt in numerous corners of the world. Areas once pristine and untouched by decay now bear its telltale signs. The death-touched catacombs, for example, are not simply ancient burial grounds. They are places where the Deathroot has taken hold, animating the fallen and transforming them into grotesque undead. Similarly, the blighted landscape of Caelid, already scarred by the scarlet rot, finds itself further defiled by the insidious tendrils of Deathroot, a grim testament to the pervasive nature of Godwin's curse. Even the very air in these regions seems to thicken with an oppressive sense of dread, a palpable sign of the encroaching undeath. The roots themselves are often described as gnarled, black, and pulsating with a faint, malevolent energy, snaking through the earth, breaching crypts, and even twisting around the bones of the long deceased. Their touch is said to be cold and clammy, instilling a profound sense of unease in anyone who encounters them. The ground where Deathroot flourishes often becomes barren and sickly, unable to sustain normal life, further highlighting its destructive influence. The Golden Order, under the continued influence of Queen Marika, has made desperate attempts to purge this burgeoning corruption. Their efforts are understandable, given that Deathroot and those who live in death represented a direct affront to the very tenets of the Golden Order, which dictates a natural cycle of life, death, and rebirth into the Erd Tree. The Erd Tree burial watchdogs, constructs imbued with a sacred purpose, were deployed to guard catacombs and prevent the spread of undeath. Priests and scholars of the Golden Order tirelessly sought remedies and purges, employing incantations and holy relics to combat the insidious blight. However, their attempts have largely been in vain. The corruption persists, a testament to the profound and almost cosmic nature of Godwin's undeath. It is a wound too deep, a poison too pervasive for conventional methods to fully eradicate. The very act of cutting down Deathroot seems to only strengthen its resolve, causing it to sprout anew with renewed vigor, as if mocking the efforts of the living. This constant struggle has drained resources and morale from the Golden Order, diverting their attention and power from other pressing matters, further destabilizing the lands between. The sheer scale of the infestation, coupled with its seemingly unkillable nature, has led to a growing sense of despair among those who uphold the Golden Order, as they witness their sacred tenets being eroded by an enemy they cannot truly defeat. The persistence of Deathroot, despite all efforts, underscores the profound disruption caused by Godwin's unique demise. Amidst this spreading blight, various factions and individuals have emerged, each with their own understanding and approach to Godwin's undeath. Fia, the deathbed companion, is one such figure. Her motivations are complex, rooted in a deep-seated desire to bring true death to the Prince of Death. She believes that by returning Godwin's stolen soul to his body, she can finally grant him the peace he was denied, thereby ending the proliferation of Deathroot and the suffering of those who live in death. Her actions are driven by a compassionate, albeit controversial, understanding of death, one that challenges the Golden Order's rigid doctrines. She sees the undead not as abominations to be purged, but as lost souls trapped in an agonizing limbo, and her ultimate goal is to offer them release. Fia's quest involves a delicate and dangerous ritual requiring specific artifacts and the cooperation of others who share her unconventional perspective on death. Her intimate connection with Godwin's corpse, lying in the depths of the Deeproot depths, is central to her plan as she attempts to weave the threads of his fragmented existence back together. She is often seen embracing the bodies of the deceased, drawing their lingering vitality into herself, a ritual she believes prepares her for the ultimate act of restoring Godwin's soul. Her methods are viewed with suspicion by many, particularly those aligned with the Golden Order, who see her actions as consorting with forbidden practices and further blaspheming against the established order of life and death. In stark contrast to Fia's compassionate approach is D, Hunter of the Dead. D dedicates his life to eradicating those who live in death, viewing them as nothing short of abominations that must be purged from the lands between. His fervent belief aligns perfectly with the Golden Order's doctrine regarding undeath, and he sees his mission as a sacred duty. D's unwavering resolve and skill in combat make him a formidable foe to any who have succumbed to Godwin's influence. He is a man of action, driven by a clear-cut moral code that leaves no room for compromise when it comes to the undead. His methods are brutal and efficient, employing holy weapons and incantations specifically designed to banish the unholy existence of those who live in death. He views Fia's attempts to return Godwin's soul as a dangerous folly, a misguided path that only prolongs the suffering and pollution of the lands between. His dedication is absolute, bordering on fanaticism, and he will stop at nothing to cleanse the world of this blight. D's presence highlights the fundamental schism in how different individuals and factions perceive and react to the ongoing crisis of undeath. His pursuit of the undead is relentless, leading him to various catacombs and blighted areas where the Deathroot has taken root, always seeking to eliminate its manifestations. The very concept of those who live in death is central to understanding Godwin's corruption. These are individuals who, for various reasons, die without the blessing of the Erd Tree, and whose souls are therefore unable to return to the Great Tree for rebirth. Instead, animated by Godwin's pervasive influence and the insidious tendrils of Deathroot, their bodies are reanimated, becoming grotesque, shambling mockeries of their former selves. They are not truly alive, nor are they truly dead. They exist in a horrifying limbo, a state of perpetual agony and decay. Their existence is a direct affront to the natural order, a perversion of the cycle of life and death that has governed the lands between for millennia. They often retain fragments of their former memories or instincts, leading to tragic and disturbing encounters for the tarnished. Their bodies are often covered in the black, gnarled roots of deathroot, or show signs of advanced decay, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. They are driven by a primal urge, often to lash out at the living or to simply wander aimlessly, trapped in their cursed existence. This phenomenon is not limited to humans, animals, and even certain plants can be affected, creating a truly terrifying ecosystem of undeath. Emerging from the depths of the lands between, often from forgotten waterways and sunken crypts, are the spectral boatmen known as the Tibia Mariners. These ethereal figures, piloting spectral boats, serve a grim purpose, ferrying the souls of the dead and, more ominously, actively spreading deathroot. Their very presence is a harbinger of undeath, a visible manifestation of the encroaching blight. They are often accompanied by skeletal minions and other forms of those who live in death, further cementing their role as agents of corruption. The Tibia Mariners are shrouded in mystery, their origins and ultimate allegiance unclear, though their actions undeniably serve to propagate Godwin's curse. They are often found in watery areas, near lakes, rivers, and even flooded ruins, their spectral boats gliding silently through the mists. The music that accompanies their appearances is often melancholic and haunting, adding to their eerie mystique. Their presence suggests a deeper, perhaps even ancient, connection to the forces of death and the underworld, predating even the Golden Order itself. They are not merely transporters, they are active participants in the ongoing spread of the Prince of Death's influence, purposefully sowing the seeds of undeath wherever they go. The Black Knife assassins, those shadowy figures responsible for Godwin's initial demise, continue to operate in the shadows, their motives now even more shrouded in mystery. While their initial act was to sever Godwin's soul, their ongoing activities suggest a deeper, more complex agenda that extends beyond a single assassination. Are they still working for Rani, or have their allegiances shifted? Do they seek to further the spread of undeath, or are they attempting to control it? Their continued presence and occasional interventions in the affairs of the lands between raise more questions than answers, hinting at a larger unseen game being played behind the scenes. Their silent, swift movements and their ability to appear and disappear without a trace make them formidable and enigmatic adversaries. Their black cloaks and daggers, imbued with the power of destined death, are instantly recognizable and strike fear into the hearts of many. Their involvement in the ongoing narrative suggests that the consequences of the Night of Black Knives are far from over, and that their role in the unfolding drama of Godwin's corruption may yet be revealed. Their continued existence also implies that the power of destined death, which they wielded, is still very much a force in the world, capable of influencing events in profound and unexpected ways. Further complicating the grim tapestry of undeath is the twin bird, a creature deeply associated with death, and more specifically, the outer god of death. This enigmatic entity is directly linked to the spread of the deathblight affliction, a virulent disease that causes its victims to erupt in grotesque, thorny growths, eventually leading to a painful and agonizing death. The twin bird's connection to the outer god of death suggests a cosmic dimension to the ongoing corruption, hinting at forces far beyond the understanding of mortals. Its influence is subtle yet pervasive, manifesting in the decay of the land and the suffering of its inhabitants. The twin bird is often depicted as a skeletal, two headed bird, a chilling symbol of death's duality. Its presence signifies a profound disruption to the natural order, as the outer god it serves seeks to impose its own twisted vision of death upon the lands between. The death blight it spreads is a particularly insidious form of corruption, not merely animating the dead, but actively causing life to wither and perish in a horrific manner. This further exacerbates the already dire situation, adding another layer of suffering and despair to the blighted lands. The twin bird's existence points to the possibility that Godwin's undeath is not merely an isolated incident, but a catalyst for a larger, more ancient struggle involving powerful cosmic entities. The Godskin apostles and nobles, formidable servants of the Glomide Queen, also play a significant, albeit indirect, role in the ongoing conflict surrounding Godwin's corruption. These terrifying figures, draped in the flayed skins of gods, are intrinsically connected to the concept of true death, wielding the power of destined death itself. While their primary objective appears to be the restoration of the Glomide Queen's dominion over death, their very existence and the power they wield make them relevant to the struggle against Godwin's undeath. Their presence suggests that the conflict over death in the lands between is not simply a matter of the Golden Order versus the Prince of Death, but a multifaceted struggle involving ancient powers and rival deities. Their methods are brutal and uncompromising, seeking to impose their own vision of death upon the world. The Godskin apostles and nobles, with their mastery over destined death, represent a potent force that could potentially either exacerbate or resolve the crisis of Godwin's undeath, depending on their ultimate goals and allegiances. Their connection to the Glomide Queen, who once held sway over death before Marika's rise, adds another layer of historical depth and complexity to the ongoing struggle. Their involvement underscores the idea that the concept of death itself is a battleground in the lands between, with various factions vying for control over its ultimate nature. The pervasive spread of Deathroot has a tangible impact on the landscape of the lands between, creating new catacombs and crypts where those who live in death reside. These structures, often found in unexpected places, are not merely ancient burial sites. They are manifestations of the ongoing corruption, places where the veil between life and death has thinned to a dangerous degree. The Wyndham Catacombs, for example, are a prime example of such a place, teeming with animated corpses and radiating an oppressive aura of undeath. These newly formed catacombs serve as breeding grounds for the undead, further solidifying Godwin's insidious influence over the land. They are often dark, labyrinthine, and filled with traps and dangers, reflecting the twisted nature of the forces that created them. The very architecture of these places often seems to warp and shift, as if the Deathroot itself is reshaping the environment to suit its malevolent purposes. The presence of these catacombs, constantly expanding and appearing in new locations, is a stark reminder of the relentless and unstoppable nature of Godwin's corruption. They are monuments to a broken cycle, grim testaments to the triumph of undeath over the natural order. Perhaps the most alarming consequence of Godwin's undeath and the pervasive influence of Deathroot is the visible decay and blight affecting the Erd Tree itself. This sacred symbol of the Golden Order, once a beacon of life and grace, now shows signs of illness, its golden leaves sometimes appearing dull or even blackened in places. This decay is not merely aesthetic, it suggests a deeper, more profound corruption at the very heart of the lands between. The Erd tree's suffering is a direct reflection of Godwin's undeath, a grim indication that the Prince of Death's curse is slowly but surely consuming everything, even the most sacred of entities. The presence of Deathroot within the Erd tree's roots is a terrifying prospect, suggesting that the very source of life in the lands between is being poisoned from within. This blight on the Erd tree represents a catastrophic threat, as its continued health is intrinsically linked to the well being of the entire realm. Should the Erd tree succumb entirely to this corruption, the consequences would be unimaginable, potentially leading to the complete collapse of the Golden Order and the triumph of undeath. The slow, agonizing decay of the Erd tree serves as a constant, looming threat, a visual reminder of the profound and far reaching consequences of Godwin the Golden's tragic and unique demise. It is a symbol of hope turning to despair, a testament to the enduring power of a death that was never truly meant to be. The golden glow that once emanated from its branches now seems to flicker and wane, a subtle yet chilling sign of the encroaching darkness. The leaves, also once vibrant, are now brittle and prone to falling, scattering across the land like dead hopes. The very ground around the Erd tree, once fertile and blessed, now occasionally shows patches of blackened earth where the insidious tendrils of Deathroot have begun to surface, a silent testament to the ongoing battle beneath the surface. This decay is a constant, agonizing reminder to the inhabitants of the lands between that even their most sacred and powerful symbol is not immune to the pervasive corruption emanating from Godwin's unholy existence. And so, after countless ages of cosmic machinations, divine betrayals, and the slow, agonizing decay of a once golden civilization, we arrive at the present day, the age of the Tarnished, the very moment the player begins their journey. This era marks the return of the Tarnished, those warriors and heroes once exiled from the lands between for their lack of grace, now inexplicably guided by that very same grace to return to a broken realm. Their purpose, both divine and desperately needed, is to mend the shattered Elden Ring, and in doing so, ascend to the mantle of Elden Lord, a title that carries with it the immense responsibility of restoring order to a land consumed by chaos. The lands between, once a beacon of prosperity under Queen Marika's eternal reign, now lie in a state of profound decay. The very fabric of reality seems to fray at the edges, a direct consequence of the shattering and the subsequent warring among the demigods. These powerful godlike beings, Marika's offspring and adopted children, each possess a great rune, a fragment of the Elden Ring, and their endless conflict has plunged the land into perpetual twilight and despair. Widespread corruption, both spiritual and physical, infects every corner of the realm, from the monstrous grafting experiments of Godric to the maddening influence of the frenzied flame. The Tarnished, therefore, are not merely embarking on a quest for power, but on a desperate mission to confront the lingering mysteries and devastating consequences of all the past events we have meticulously explored, to untangle the intricate web of deceit, ambition, and cosmic horror that has defined this world for millennia. The journey begins abruptly, almost violently, as the Tarnished awaken in the Chapel of Anticipation, a desolate, crumbling structure that serves as a grim introduction to the perils ahead. Here, almost immediately, They are thrust into combat against the grafted scion, a grotesque amalgamation of flesh and steel, a low tier product of the grafting experiments that plague the lands between. This creature, a harbinger of the horrors to come, serves as a brutal tutorial, a stark reminder that survival in this world demands strength and cunning. The battle is, for most, a predetermined defeat, a necessary narrative beat to establish the Tarnished's initial vulnerability. Upon this inevitable defeat, the Tarnished are not met with death, but with a mysterious transportation. They awaken once more, this time in the eerie confines of the stranded graveyard, a subterranean chamber filled with the silent graves of forgotten warriors. It is here, amidst the decaying remnants of past lives, that the Tarnished encounter their first sight of grace. These ethereal golden wisps of light are manifestations of the guidance of grace, serving as checkpoints, places of respite, and conduits for leveling up. They are the silent, ever present guides in a world that offers little other comfort. Almost immediately after this pivotal discovery, the Tarnished are greeted by Vare, a mysterious figure cloaked in a pristine white mask, his voice dripping with an unsettling blend of condescension and veiled invitation. He mocks the Tarnished's maidenless status, a direct jab at their perceived lack of a finger maiden, the essential companion required to channel runes into strength. Vara's words, though outwardly disdainful, subtly direct the Tarnished towards their true purpose, urging them to follow the guidance of grace and seek out the shattered remnants of the Elden Ring. His motivations, however, remain shrouded in mystery, hinting at deeper, more sinister allegiances. He is a guide, yes, but one whose path may lead to unforeseen consequences. Following Vara's cryptic advice and the subtle pull of grace, the Tarnished are directed towards Stormvale Castle, a formidable fortress that looms menacingly on the horizon. This imposing structure is the domain of Godric the Grafted, one of the Shard Bearers and a direct descendant of Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. Godric, a grotesque figure obsessed with grafting the limbs of defeated warriors onto his own body to gain power, represents the initial objective for the Tarnished, the first major hurdle on their path to becoming Elden Lord. His castle is a testament to the brutality and depravity that has consumed the demigods since the Shattering. As the Tarnished venture forth from the stranded graveyard, navigating the treacherous paths of Limgrave, they encounter Melina, a spectral maiden with one eye sealed shut, her presence both ethereal and profoundly significant. She offers the Tarnished an accord, a pact that will fundamentally shape their journey. In exchange for being brought to the Erd Tree,